Hi everyone. Welcome back to Etymology Explorer. Here is your daily dose of etymology in 6 minutes. Etymology of the term apartheid. The term apartheid comes from the Afrikaans language. Afrikaans is a West Germanic language spoken primarily in South Africa and Namibia, with smaller communities of speakers in neighboring countries such as Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho. It originated from Dutch, brought to the Cape Colony by Dutch settlers in the 17th century. Over time, Afrikaans evolved into a distinct language, incorporating influences from other languages spoken in the region, including indigenous African languages, Malay, Portuguese, and French. The term apartheid means apartness or separateness. It originated in South Africa during the early 20th century and was officially adopted as a policy by the National Party government in 1948. The term embodies the systematic segregation and discrimination of racial groups, primarily enforced to maintain white minority rule over the majority black population. Countries practicing apartheid in the 20th century. South Africa. Apartheid was the most infamous in South Africa, where it was formalized between 1948 and 1994. It segregated the population based on racial classifications, white, black, colored and Indian, and denied basic rights to non-white South Africans. Namibia. Namibia, under South African rule until 1990, also experienced apartheid-like policies imposed by South Africa. While apartheid as a term is specific to South Africa, other countries have been accused of practicing systemic segregation and discrimination, though not always under that label. For instance, the United States, under Jim Crow laws until the 1960s, though not labeled apartheid, laws enforced racial segregation and inequality. Israel-Palestine. Critics and organizations have debated whether Israeli policies toward Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and within Israel constitute apartheid. Abolition of apartheid in South Africa was due to the following factors. Internal resistance. Widespread protests by black South Africans and allied groups. The rise of resistance organizations like the African National Congress, ANC, and leaders like Nelson Mandela. Events like the Sharpeville Massacre, 1960, and Soweto Uprising, 1976, highlighted the brutality of the system, garnering global attention. International pressure. Economic sanctions and trade restrictions by the United Nations and Western nations. Cultural and sports boycotts, isolating South Africa on the global stage. Divestment campaigns that pressured foreign companies to cut ties with South Africa. Reforms and negotiations. The 1980s saw limited reforms under pressure, but they failed to dismantle apartheid. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was released after 27 years of imprisonment. Between 1990 to 1994, negotiations between the National Party and ANC led to democratic elections in 1994, marking the formal end of apartheid. Consequences of apartheid in South Africa. Social and economic inequality. Deep racial and economic disparities remain, with black South Africans disproportionately affected by poverty, unemployment, and limited access to quality education and healthcare. Psychological and cultural damage. Generations of systemic oppression caused lasting trauma and divisions in South African society. Global influence. The fight against apartheid became a symbol of resistance to racial oppression worldwide, inspiring other movements for justice and equality. Lessons learned from apartheid. Unity in diversity. The post-apartheid South African Constitution emphasizes human dignity, equality, and human rights for all. Role of international solidarity. Global support through sanctions and advocacy proved critical in dismantling apartheid. Reconciliation through truth. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission (TRC) aimed to address past abuses and promote healing. Is apartheid still practiced today? While apartheid as a legal system ended in South Africa in 1994, forms of systemic segregation and discrimination persist in many regions worldwide. Israel-Palestine. Human rights groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have described Israeli policies toward Palestinians as constituting apartheid, particularly in the occupied territories, for example in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The Israeli government denies these allegations, arguing its policies are security measures rather than racial discrimination. Other cases, racial and ethnic discrimination, though not officially labeled apartheid, exists in some countries, perpetuating systemic inequalities. Is Israel an apartheid state? This is a deeply contested issue with differing perspectives. Supporters of the apartheid label claim systemic segregation and unequal treatment of Palestinians amount to apartheid. They cite separate legal systems for Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank, restricted movement, and land expropriations. Opponents of the apartheid label argue that apartheid implies systematic racial segregation, while Israel's policies are rooted in national security concerns. They highlight that Israeli Arabs have citizenship rights, although critics note disparities in rights and opportunities. The debate remains politically and emotionally charged, with varying conclusions depending on the framework applied. That was your daily dose of etymology in 6 minutes. I hope to see you soon in the next video. Please like, share and subscribe.